All right, so we're back. Let me first say, once again, skipped last week. So if anyone noticed that, well, firstly, well done. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it. And thanks for noticing where we don't put anything out. What can I say? School holidays is my only excuse. It's like, dude, my whole life gets thrown into sort of upside down mode. It's good having the kids around, but it just gets busy and crazy and everything like that. And then we got a few things going on that don't usually go on. So I've just had to kind of say no to a few things, but we're back now. And thanks for hanging in there with us. I got to meet a listener today.
Awesome.
Had lunch with him. And
the one fan.
It's our one
fan
guy.
That's out there.
It's our one guy. Yeah. Totally.
And not Ari this time.
Not Ari. No. And Mom. I mean, we love you too, Mom, but it's not you either. Yeah, no, so we got so Tony, shout out, and we will hear more from Tony, see what's going on. He lives close in Wellington in the greater region, so that was really cool just to get to meet someone. And we've just we've had some good comments coming in. I'm loving the fact that I'm not doing anything. We've got some good feedback coming in. It means we must be on a bit of a backlog and people are catching up and finally appreciating the great brilliance of our show. And just
50 years from now, people are going to be discovering it. Yeah,
certainly. As we've been going through these guys, we have been bringing our scholarly best to the table. And so today, on that note, we're looking at John Cassian's conferences from 41 to 30. I will say up front, I have absolutely never heard of this guy ever in my whole life.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, John Cassian.
But I did a little reading.
Good.
Do you know him? Do you?
Well, he's the he cast the mold for the medieval monastic movement.
Right. And apparently he was the guy. Benedict's rule and all that. They all just drew from this guy. So it's a glimpse into your kind of Egyptian monastery life, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
The Cenobitic life.
Dude, what's up with that? We're reading some crazy stuff.
He's famous for two writings. He's got his institutes and he's got his conferences.
Mm-hmm.
His institutes are sort of like, this is how you run a monastery, and his conferences is a bunch of quotes from the Desert Fathers, where he just sort of he interviews them, he quotes them, and I think Benedict. So every evening meal, he would have this read out loud for all the monks who were in the Benedictine monasteries.
Because we're looking at this thing called conferences, and apparently what he did was he spoke to all the 15 different Egyptian abbas, the fathers, and just sort of had these conversations, kind of did a podcast with each one of them, and just kind of pulled some insights and put these into serious, or a series of lecture formats. And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting stuff from a Western perspective. I mean, you're just getting this window into this ancient Egyptian sort of sphere of Christianity that somehow made its way, as you say, into the medieval scenario there through Benedict's rule. But and we will look at that too. I'm sure we got Benedict's rule coming up. But anyway, so it's just this like the 7 deadly sins come from this guy.
Yeah, I think he's got the eight vices.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Close enough. I think he was also the first to bring the men and the woman together in a type of monastic commune.
Right. Yeah, he had the men and the women separate ones, but together. And yeah, brilliant. So, not the kind of thing you'd pick up at the local bookstore, but necessary to throw a big wide net in there and try and read. And again, we'll say this if you are just joining us. Let me actually say this as well, because I don't say it enough, and I'm kind of realizing that lately. Nick and I are both pastors in New Zealand, so that's where we are. We don't even introduce ourselves or anything, but we're both pastors in New Zealand, and I'm in Wellington. Nick's in the other little part of the island. If you've ever seen that tiny little thing called New Zealand, Nick's on the other side, and down in Timaru, and we just, what do? We've just known each other for a while, and we just thought, we talk, so let's podcast. Why not? Let's display our brilliance to the world. It's just too difficult holding this stuff in, and basically. Why are we reading John Cassian's conferences? Well, as pastors, I feel like, we're constantly going on about the value of church history, and you have to just read outside of your generation. You have to try and just get yourself out of that comfort zone. It's very, very helpful to do that. And we're always teaching about church history and that sort of thing. And, we're fans. It's definitely not my area of expertise. It's not something that we claim to be, any experts in. But it's not limited to the experts. Everyone can read church history, and so we're just dipping into various texts, just so that if you wanted to follow along, you're actually just reading it with us. Most of the stuff's open domain, so you can grab it on the internet, or some those big massive volume sets that you couldn't get anywhere else prior to the internet are now just completely on the internet, which is awesome. We got to make use of that. And so Philip Schaff, where did you get yours this week?
I'm just using my Kindle.
Okay,
yeah,
Philip Schaff.
That's the Schaff version.
Yeah, brilliant. So there we go, and that's online as well. And so just stop this, go check it out, grab John Cassian conferences. We'll just go through a few of these paragraphs here, and just get a feel for what that's about. And then we just kind of stop and talk about it a little bit, and just reflect on these things. Obviously, I think that's valuable as well. Not because we're experts in Cassianite theology or anything like that, but because we want to filter things through our rubric. We want to process via our rubric. All these little snippets present interesting things. Nick loves this stuff. I mean, when it comes down to like monastic life, this is what Nick wishes he was.
A wheelhouse.
Oh my goodness.
I learned something interesting about Christian mysticism. So the 3 stages of Christian mysticism. So the mysticism has to do with the monastic life.
Yeah.
So there's purgatio or purgatio. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Right.
And then there's illuminatio.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's unitio. So purgation is the first couple of years. It could be as many as 5 years.
Sounds like purgatory.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So for the first 5 years, you just suffer. You just suffer deprivation. You just cut yourself off from society, your family, your belongings. You just learn to suffer. That's the first level initiation into the ascetic life is purgation.
Right.
Purgatio.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's illumination. And that's where you just feed on the Gospels, in particular the Sermon on the Mount. So like you just take that literal reading of one cloak, giving the other one away, turning the other cheek,
right.
Just like flat literal interpretations of the Sermon on the Mount. And then there's unitio, and that's where you become. It's I guess what Aquinas would call the beatific vision.
Uh-huh.
Where you unite with the Godhead. This is where you have the guys running away off into the caves.
Yes.
Trying to have that single moment.
It gets a little pantheistic on that. Yeah.
Ultimate connection. So that's like the top of the food chain of the ascetic ladder.
Totally.
Is to attain to unitio.
Man, you've just described yourself.
Yes,
it's amazing. I mean, it's hard to. I remember walking around with Nick in India for a while. We were doing some ministry there, and then on the way back, we came by Singapore, and we got this really cool. Well, it was actually like quite a normal hotel. It wasn't that flash, but like Nick slept on the floor. He was just like breaking out in a rash with all the prosperity all around him.
Everywhere I looked, there was a Ferrari, a Lamborghini.
He wasn't taking it well, folks.
AMG, Mercedes.
I was in my element.
Medallions in the pavement.
Yeah, I love the medallions. It was great, and everything's so flashy and awesome. And Nick was just like, "Oh man," he was lamenting the worldliness of the situation. So, anyways, I've seen him roll with this, and but it's hard to fault when you've got this. It's. I mean, obviously, we look at that and we go, "Oh, we wouldn't take that." We've got our reasons for not going in this direction, right? And we could talk about those as we go, but it is, you've got to admit, as you read this stuff, it's almost like reading about martyrdom or reading about those, the stuff we've read already. You just, there's some gangster respect that's required, someone who's going to do this and actually give their lives in this way and consecrate themselves, even, in those literal ways. You can't diss them very easily, No. There's something.
It's almost like every person who's ever made an impact in these early years of Christianity wrote a tract on celibacy.
Right.
Or, adoring virginity or something.
Right.
You look at anyone who's made an impact has had that extreme all-in attitude.
Oh man. And it's such a crazy point because, if you've ever read, Richard Niebuhr's Christ and Culture, the famous book, he makes a point there. I think I might have mentioned it before, but I think it's so striking that basically, if you think about the transformer of culture model and, these ideas we just get into, redeemed society, all sorts of things that have taken hold of the reformed world. And then on the other side of the spectrum would be this kind of, just retreat from society, monastic vibe.
The opposite of assimilation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's run its course all the way through. I mean, obviously you got your weird sects involved, but basically, as we think about the monastic movement, I mean, that's certainly they would definitely fit into that mold where they're just withdrawing. they're if they're going to make an impact, it's not via transforming anything. It's by withdrawing from it and leading this exemplary sort of counterculture existence. But what's interesting about it is that you see throughout history, very rarely has the transformer model actually worked. You've just had very little, especially as it moves into those liberal, those extremely liberal sides. Whereas you see that, ironically, those guys that have pulled away, like the monks, the early monks, I mean, they were the major shapers of the medieval world,
Yeah.
and you have so many instances of that where the people that really did not set out to transform anything, but just pursue holiness and apartness, ended up being the ones that did the most damage, so to speak, for the kingdom, and damage in a good way there.
Now you got to see that trend in history, and you got to remind yourself that the medicine for antinomianism is not legalism, it's grace.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So you've just got to recognize that we're attracted to conviction and zeal, but it's actually grace that transforms the heart and brings transformation, not legalism. And that's the balance right there.
Yeah. Amen. Good. Well, all right. So in this conference 11, he's talking to a guy. How shall we pronounce him? His name?
Kairimon.
Kairimon? That sounds very Egyptian. I like it.
Well, Kai as in Christ. So the CH is because he wrote in Latin and Greek. So.
All right. I like the way you think. Kairimon.
Kairimon. Just take a run at it and just keep with it.
That's it. All right. Kairimon. Yeah, I was going to go in the Kairimon direction, but anyway. All right, so we've got a few of these things. Let's go for it, and we'll just stop and make some comments along the way. So we're reading that he's talking to this Egyptian Abba guy, and this whole thing's coming out, and it's all about essentially not following Christ for fear of hell, or just for desire for rewards or anything, but there's something higher that we need to aspire to, essentially. Yeah. So very good. Very profound.
All in the area of motivation. Yeah, it's a key. Yeah. It's an excellent discussion.
It is. All right, so let's do this. I'll start us off in paragraph.
So I mean, maybe you should read them all. Mine are quite long. Are they? And I suspect yours are shorter. So go ahead. I'll just make comments.
Yeah, mine. He's got quite a I don't know, like quite a weird style. So they're long sentences, but I've got shortish. Well, I suppose they are quite long paragraphs. But anyways, here we go. There are three things which enable men to control their sins: fear of hell, or of earthly laws, hope for and desire of the kingdom of heaven, a liking for goodness itself, and the love of virtue. For we read that fear loathes the contamination of evil. The fear of the Lord hates evil, and that's from Proverbs 8:13. Hope also shuts out all the assaults of sin, for those who hope in him shall not fail. Psalm 34:22. Love also fears no destruction from sin, for love never fails. 1 Corinthians 13:8. And again, love covers a multitude of sins. 1 Peter 4:8. Therefore, the blessed apostle summarizes the whole of salvation in the attainment of those three virtues. These three remain: faith, hope, and love. 1 Corinthians 13:13. It is faith that makes us shun the contagion of sin from the fear of future judgment and punishment. It is hope that anticipates heavenly rewards and withdraws our mind from present things to despise all bodily pleasures. It is love that fires us with zeal for the love of Christ and the fruit of spiritual goodness, and makes us hate with a perfect hatred whatever is opposed to these. These three virtues all seem to aim at the same end of inciting us to abstain from everything unlawful. Yet they differ greatly from each other in degree of excellence. Faith and hope belong to those who aim at goodness, but have not yet acquired the love of virtue, while love belongs especially to God and to those who have appropriated his image and likeness. For God alone does good simply for his own sake, not motivated by fear, thanks, or reward. There we go. That's the first chapter. Now, our paragraph. So that's crazy. I mean, firstly, there's a lot of Bible in there. The guy's
Lots of
quoting scripture,
verses.
and that's pretty awesome. I like to see that. There they are. They're drinking the Bible. They're drinking it in. They're,
Totally.
you sometimes get the impression, when you think about the monastic movement, that they were on some crazy transcendent, sort of idea. And that was often the case. But these are Bible guys, and this is probably all from memory. And they all just memorized their Old and New Testaments, and they had nothing to do but memorize the whole day, and so they did. And it comes out in the way that they talk. It almost oozes out. And so I like that. That's my first observation. What do you think?
It's good. It's good. I think we'd probably take issue with the exegesis. When
Right.
Paul talks about faith, hope, and love, he's not talking about the three motivations for the Christian life.
Right.
In the way that these guys are, loading up the terms.
Yeah. Although it is interesting that you could see how you could wiggle around and get there.
It would make for a good sermon.
Right.
It's sort of like, is it what Paul intended?
Right. Exactly. It almost like it's he uses the verse as a sort of summary theological point that he arrives at through other means, which was almost like an acceptable way to go about the whole situation.
Yeah.
Almost reminds me of the way that we approach amillennialism. Even if we're right, even if we're wrong, we're 100% right.
Yeah. I like and I don't like what you're saying.
I mean, I'm just saying, think about it. What are we saying other than Jesus came and died for us?
I guess, and I think all we're trying to say is that, we do use the Bible differently, having gone to Bible college, and we've been a lot more, we've had the Reformation, we got the grammatical historical model.
Yeah.
We can't despise them for the way they used it.
No.
But we can't imitate them either.
Yeah.
So we've got to appreciate what they're saying. We've got to recognize these are the things they believe are taught from Scripture, but not necessarily from the places they're extracting.
Well, I'm just thinking, even their last sentence there, therefore the blessed apostle summarizes the whole of salvation. What he actually means there is what we ultimately attain to in sanctification,
Yeah.
And, at that level, faith, hope, and love it's massive. You know what I mean? In this life, I mean, that's going to be the big thing. And those are the... Yeah.
One of the things I struggled with was, he makes out that faith and hope, you got your regular Christians, faith and hope, it's some of their pedestrian motivations, but then one day you too will attain to the upper echelons of Christianity and reach perfection, where you now, out of a love of virtue.
Yes. Now let's put put the love discussion on hold, because he comes back to it, and through the epistle of the first epistle of John. And I thought it was quite interesting the way he went about that, which was actually I was agreeable to, which I was amazed by. So let's just hang on with that one for a second.
Cool.
But basically, so what he's doing here is here's the other thing I want to say up front. I think one thing that comes through is, as you said, is this kind of ascending the ladder mysticism thing. You're getting that loud and clear. Ascending the ladder of sanctification, in your contemplative life. But also just almost an overrealized or a triumphalism or a perfectionism or something like that is going to come through, in that they have every expectation of almost just getting rid of sin entirely and hitting this moment of transcendence, as you say.
John Cassian is accused of semi-Pelagianism.
Right.
And B.B. Warfield said that, summarizing John Cassian, it's as, you turn to God and then God helps your turning.
Mm-hmm.
That's semi-Pelagianism. So we understand God to be the catalyst. The catalyst is starting and speeding up a reaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In John Cassian, you're the catalyst, not God.
Yeah. There we go. So that's going to come through. Absolutely. All right. So
number 7.
Number 7. Here we go. I'm reading this one.
Yeah, you read it. You got shorter readings. Mine are longer.
Is it? Okay. Anyone aiming at perfection, he says, should rise from that first stage of fear, which we rightly call servile, and climb to the next stage. So there you have it, right? The higher path of hope. There he can be compared not to a slave, but to an employee, because he looks for the payment of a reward. No longer worried about forgiveness of sins or afraid of punishment, he is conscious of his own good works and anticipates the promised reward. But he has not yet reached the love of a son who trusts in his father's kindness and liberality, and has no doubt that all that belongs to the Father is his. We ought to hasten on, so that by means of the indissoluble grace of love we may rise to the third stage of sonship, believing that all that the Father has is ours, and thus being counted worthy to receive the image and likeness of our Heavenly Father. These are stages on the way. We start by avoiding sin from fear of punishment or hope or of reward, and then are enabled to progress to the stage of love. For there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with torment, but he who fears is not perfect in love. We therefore love because God first loved us. And it's from 1 John. I was talking about this earlier, 4 verse 18. We can only ascend to true perfection when we love him solely because he loved us, just as he loved us for no other reason but our salvation. So we must zealously strive to ascend from fear to hope, and from hope to love of God and of virtue. And that's the completion of that paragraph. Now, okay, so that's what I was talking about, because, at one level, I found myself, here's why I was feeling strangely agreeable to this. I was like, it really is, it has been my experience, it very much, let's put it into the sanctification bucket, okay? And you're coming as a Christian. I mean, I gotta be honest. Hell was a big thing for me, and
early Christianity,
I'm like,
there's a lot of fear drivenness.
I'm like, get to that cross, get to it quick, and that I'm just stoked that I'm not going to hell. Is that first thing, and then the possibility of that heaven is in view, and all that starts dawning on you, and that motivates you, and it's just, there is a lot of that. And then what he says here is you go from, I love the way he describes it, you go from kind of like the servile status, really, to you just don't want to be beaten, essentially, to this employee status.
He uses the word hireling in my
right copy. There we go.
Slave to hireling to son.
And and as I think about it, even now, I mean, my ongoing wrestle, and I think probably till the day that I die, will be going back and forth and really becoming more and more assured of this reality of sonship. And I, this is just the Bible. This is 1 John, where it's perfect love that casts out fear. The idea that we are, so I'll never forget reading John Owen on this, where he was saying, listen, your greatest sin, your greatest blasphemy is not believing that Christ loves you, and you have to, this is the thing that you got to work through. You still don't believe that he has loved you. You don't believe in his perfect love. You have not yet experienced that. And I remember hitting me and thinking, oh my goodness, Jesus has died.
Choose assurance or sin.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take assurance.
Exactly. So it's so what he's describing there is almost like a journey, through the sanctification
totally
process.
Resonate with that. I don't know if I as an early Christian, I used to love Keith Green.
Oh, that was
Keith Green and I had a very similar walk.
Okay.
He was this hippie muso, loved Charles Finney, got deeply involved in Charles Finney, read Charles Finney, got born again.
Yeah.
As we all did when we read Finney.
Okay.
And then he discovered grace.
Right.
And I was like, oh, my relationship's not based on performance, it's based upon grace.
Right.
Wow. And just reveling in the love of God.
Yeah, in the love of God.
I mean, that was definitely a reality. So I really appreciate that. And there's a real maturity in the counsel here. It's someone who's walked with Christians who've had to, really struggle with assurance. And when I hear this, I resonate with it. This is a real, genuine spiritual experience. The man who wrote this and said these things is a born-again Christian.
Right.
That it shouts out.
Totally.
But I guess my only critique would be, we would want to stop. We would make this the milk of the faith now, wouldn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
It's let all your motivation be because he has loved you.
Yeah.
Let's root all your imperatives in the indicative of God's grace.
Right.
And let's start on that note.
Yeah, and and he does say hasten to that point. So it's not, I think probably the thing that would cause me most concern here is if he sort of said, all right, well, this is you for first level Christianity, and then you got to wait for this moment where, then you bump it up and become an employee or a hireling, and then you wait, and then, eventually almost like a Gnostic sort of a sense. But he's going, no, listen, the only, here's the reality of it, but hasten, get to the sun thing, and it's almost like he's making a category for weak Christians, he's almost living and working with that weakness that we all experience, and creating a whole category out of it, which again, is not what we would do, but it's just interesting to see how he approaches it.
Yeah.
But it did get me thinking, like, oh my goodness, am I doing that? Am I, have I, it's just such a different way to process it. Yeah, I'm thinking, all right, you're probably on level 2 right now. I need to bump up my game. I need to jump up, and then just sort of as that merges with some Oren and some other stuff you read, and just even you go to the first epistle of John, and it's just, yeah, it's good. It's good. Gets you thinking about it. So anything else we wanted to, I think, just coming back to what we were saying earlier there, the whole higher path of hope thing, you made that point. It's, the language is there, and it could be seriously misinterpreted, and probably has been. And this is probably
when I
the
was
whole
reading
deal.
through it, I thought, this would John Wesley would love this.
Yeah. Oh man, the perfection deal. Totally. Because that's what I was going to say. It's carrying that perfectionist tinge through the whole thing, which obviously is.
When Wesleyan theology said that Christian perfectionism is being swallowed up by love.
Yeah, right.
Where you love God so much that you don't want to sin.
Yeah, so that song.
That is the moment of perfectionism.
Yeah.
That's how he defined it.
Love divine, all love.
All love's excelling.
All love is, thank you. All love's excelling. They take, we don't typically in Reformed churches sing that third verse, or I think the third stanza, the one about perfection, but the whole thing is actually about the perfectionist moment where we're swallowed up in love. It's crazy. So they've omitted that from the thing. I saw that verse and I was like, whoa. It's one of my favorite hymns, but I was like, that verse is just off the charts. So, but it is interesting that if you could just take the verse out, you've got a hymn that's really amazing, and everyone agrees with it. It's just that one little excessive element that
experientially, we would agree that when you are loving God with your whole heart, you're not wanting to sin.
No, for sure.
And it's the power of a greater affection will expel our desire for sin. But we don't see it as a state. We don't see it as a second blessing of experience.
Well, it's sort of glorification at some level.
Maybe God in His grace will give it to us from time to time for little moments, but we don't call it perfectionism. It's bad theology to call it that.
Right, totally. Well, and I suppose what they meant by it. I know that often it gets overplayed. Like perfectionism isn't what they meant by it. It's not like they meant you will never sin again or anything like that. But even so, they did. Yeah, they brought it down to a moment in which there would be such a significant difference. What they were calling for is really, it's only going to happen in heaven, or it's going to be beyond that in heaven. But still, the point is that it's just asking. It's not taking into account remaining sin as it should. But really, I sing those Wesleyan hymns when they go perfectionist on me, and I'm thinking glory. That's just what it's really, an over-realized eschatology, right? I'll give you a quick little, just a slightly by the way, but same thing. I've just finished reading through all this massive theonomy stuff. Weirdest experience though, because I'm reading through Bahnsen's, application of the law and the Mosaic law, and my heart is going, amen. Amen.
Loving it, yeah.
And then I'm catching myself going like, what is, I'm a two kingdom guy. What the heck's happening over here?
What's wrong with this?
I don't know myself. What's happening? And then I realized I was longing for heaven as he was talking this, as he was talking about this time this time in which all the craziness that we see all around us will be taken away. Sin will be dealt with, punishment. And then I realized, wait a minute, that's the whole point of the Mosaic Code. It's a glimpse of glory. It's a glimpse of the kingdom, and it's right that I'm thinking that. And it's just it was so weird how you're reading just a big book and you go into this humdrum mindset and lulled and you're half asleep. And then, so I'm not really processing at that level, but then it's caught my heart sort of betrayed me, and just it would be great to have this now. In fact, I bet freaking bring the theonomy, it'd be amazing. But then I realized I was just calling for Jesus to come, that's all that was happening there.
And then you decided not to start a Christian political party.
No, and then you realize, okay, well, that would be kind of insane to do that, actually. Man, I started off, what a journey it's been. This is kind of off topic, but, just going through that, like I said, I had some of those moments, and then some other moments where I think, yeah, this is kind of moderate. This is okay. He's qualified it enough. It's all good. And then you read another paragraph, and you're like, whoa. All right, I take it back. That is terrible. And I think the most concerning thing was just the mono-covenantalist, the justification thing just gets thrown by the wayside. You can't help but, you must essentially it's going to come down to your perseverance under the law to receive this ultimate blessing. They can't get away from it, even if they try. He tries to get away, but he doesn't, in my opinion.
I think as soon as you mix, this is Samuel Marsden, who was the Australian guy who brought the church to New Zealand. He was a JP, and he used to get people whipped and flogged.
Wow.
And so he is a preacher of the gospel who whips and flogs people.
Yeah, just...
So, no, something's not. No.
Something's wrong.
No, but...
Yeah. Oh man. Anyway, okay, cool. So we might have to chop that one out and put it as a little soundbite on theonomy. All right, cool. So where was that? 18.
Chapter 8. Starting chapter 8.
All right, chapter 8. Here we go. There is a great difference between those who extinguish the inner fire of sin by means of fear of hell or hope of future reward, and those who have a horror of sin itself and of uncleanness, moved by the love of God, or love for God, sorry. These keep themselves pure simply because they love purity and long for it, not looking for a future promised reward, but delighted with the knowledge of present good things, motivated not by fear of punishment, but by delight in virtue. Such people do not take the opportunity to sin when no one is looking, nor are they corrupted by the secret allurements of thoughts. They keep the love of virtue in their hearts, and anything opposed to it, they not only do not admit into their heart, but actually hate with the utmost horror. It's one thing to hate the stains of sins and of the flesh out of a delight for some present good, and another thing to restrain unlawful desires by contemplating future reward. It is one thing to fear present loss, and another to dread future punishment. Finally, it is much better for the sake of goodness itself to be unwilling to forsake good than to withhold consent from evil for fear of evil. For in the former case, the good is chosen voluntarily, but in the latter, it is coerced and dragged out of a reluctant party, either by fear of punishment or by greed for reward. He who abstains from the delights of sin because of fear will, as soon as obstacle of fear is removed, return once more to what he loves, and thus will not acquire any stability in good, nor will he ever be free from temptation. That's
I love what he's saying on the negative. I would just want to nuance what he's saying on the positive.
Yeah, and again, for me, I'm going, okay, well, that's kind of what happens in heaven. Exactly. That we're made to just love good because we just love good. But the thing is, it's almost like he's neglecting the reality of the means of grace in the terror of hell, right? And the
Well, do we have any perfect delight in virtue this side of eternity?
Yeah, I don't think we do.
No,
it's always going to be.
I still love sin, and I mourn the fact that I love what I hate.
Yeah,
that's the Roman 7 reality, and he's not living in, he's not acknowledging that reality. He's saying you can actually attain to this little place where you always only ever want to do good things all the time because you like good things.
I think
the sinner's heart will always be with me in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said earlier, I think we could concede that there are little moments. These moments are always going to be traced by sin, but there are little moments experientially where we feel, oh my goodness, I actually just love the good, but it's so fleeting, and certainly not something you can base the Christian life on from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. But the other thing is just that there is also, and just to kind of bring out the best in what he's saying here, over years of Christianity, definitely, there must be a movement from almost what we were saying in that first paragraph, where toward the end or after many years of sanctification, you might say you're characterized more by a desire, at least, to love virtue for virtue's sake, rather than have someone whip you to it or something like that. There will be some sort of movement in that direction.
Maybe it's backwards. At the beginning of my Christian life, I'm like, I cannot stand sin. Now it's like,
now you just need someone to whip you. That's called backsliding, Nick. Good thing we had this talk on air.
Thanks for your counsel, Mike. I now repent in dust and ashes.
All right, that's good.
I'm just thinking of Paul, towards the end of his life, chief of sinners.
That's true. And but he didn't mean by that he was going backwards. He just meant that the Spirit was shining more brightly.
Aware.
Yeah. And so
I just remember as a young Christian, there were actually times where I felt like I could never sin.
Yeah. Finney. That was Finney, right?
There's immaturity. I just don't know my theology yet.
Yeah. You don't know your own heart.
There's also that emotional high I'm riding on it.
Yes. Yes, totally. Yeah. And you're just dumb. You're just super dumb, and you just
Super
kind of
dumb.
like don't even know yourself, don't know your own heart. I mean, I honestly, yeah, I'll never forget. Day 2 of Christianity, I was talking to a guy, and he was going, and I was just saying, "Oh man, I'm just sinning all the time," and he was saying, "Why? What did you do?" And he was kind of shocked that I said I had sinned, and I was like, "Well, I don't know, it's just my heart. I'm not worshiping God the way I should, and not loving neighbors the way that I should." And he's like, "Well, I mean, what have you done wrong, though? Think about it." And I remember he actually succeeded in bringing me to think, well, actually, maybe I'm being too hard on myself. Maybe I just haven't actually sinned the whole day. I mean, that's like, I mean, now I think about it, it's like preposterous, just at an experiential level. So what is happening there? I mean,
I
all you're
am
doing is,
sinning.
yeah, you are sin, exactly. And
If I am, I'm sinning.
and I often tell people
I
like the
sin by
best.
being.
Yeah, it's so true. And like people often like, I don't know, definitely new Christians start off like, well, I'm not sure I'm getting this conviction of sin. What I tell them, and I think this is great because this has worked on me, is just that's fine. Just make sure that you love God with all your heart this week. Just nail it.
Yeah.
If you can do it, go for it, nail it. And yeah, I mean, it just takes that moment of really trying. Okay, wow, I'm going to live for Christ this week. To just need a few of those, and pretty soon you're in your place. And
Amen.
not to mention those major falls along the way.
What I did appreciate what he was saying, just coming back to what he said, is it's so true that when fear is your motivation. And so I'm thinking of some counseling situations where my husband and a wife, maybe someone struggling with pornography, my wife will catch me.
Right.
And when fear is the motivation, but if you work out a way that you're not going to get found out,
you're going back to it.
You're not going to get caught. You're going to get back to it.
It's a big point.
And so we do strive towards bringing the heart into a love for virtue and actually hating the sin for its own sake.
Yeah, you're appealing to your new heart there.
Yeah.
There is a renewed heart thing that
and we want to agree with that and nurture that. We just don't want to give the false impression that you can attain to this 100% of the day and be living in a state of emotional exhaustion because you're not there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the pornography things used these days are on that point, because it used to be that you could just kind of like, just stop him from going into this place, or take the computer away. But I mean, that's so ubiquitous now. There's no ways that'll ever work. You've got to go for the heart. Otherwise,
it's got to be internal restraints, not external restraints.
Yeah, and ultimately that's all that's going to work anyway. All right, good. 13. Let's kill this last one. Yeah. Whoever then has been established in this perfect love must ascend to a higher and more sublime stage, to the fear which belongs to love. This arises not from dread of punishment or greed for reward, but from the greatest love, just as a son fears with earnest affection a most generous father, or a brother fears his brother, or a friend his friend, or a wife her husband. There is no dread of blows or reproaches, but only of a slight injury to his love, while in every word as well as act care is ever taken by anxious affection, lest there should be any cooling in the other's love for oneself. To this fear then, not sinners but saints are invited by the prophetic word, where the psalmist says, "Fear the Lord, you saints, for those who fear him lack nothing. For nothing is lacking to the perfection of those who fear the Lord in this way." When the Apostle John said that he who fears is not made perfect in love, for fear has to do with punishment, he was referring to that other penal fear. So there is a great difference between this fear, which lacks nothing and is the treasure of wisdom and knowledge, and that imperfect fear, which is called the beginning of wisdom. The latter fears punishment, and so is expelled from the hearts of those who are perfect by the incoming of the fullness of love. For there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. If the beginning of wisdom consists in fear, that will its perfection be, except in the love. Oh my goodness, trash that sentence. Let me start again. If the beginning of wisdom consists in fear, what will its perfection be in the love of Christ, which, as it contains in the fear which belongs to perfect love, is called not the beginning, but the treasure of wisdom and knowledge. Whew.
Question mark.
So, question mark, yeah.
Knowledge?
Knowledge? so there are two stages of fear. The one for beginners, for those who are still subject to the yoke and to servile terror, of which we read, "The servant shall fear his Lord," and that's from Malachi 1:6. The other in the gospel, I no longer call you servants, for the servant does not know what his Lord does. John 15:15. And therefore the servant, he tells us, does not remain in the house forever, but a son remains forever. That's from John 8:35. For he is instructing us to pass on from that penal fear to the fullest freedom of love and the confidence of the friends and sons of God. I like it. That's
Yeah, good.
what
what he's doing is he's trying to take back the word fear.
Yeah, and I like that.
So there's an aspect of Christian fear which comes out of love, that we fear to hurt.
Yeah.
Not that you can hurt God, but you fear to wound the love that's loved you so well.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it, because we typically we talk about reverence, as that kind of fear that is associated to a Christian's fear of the Lord. So, and you do have the opposite error where people are just kind of, there is no fear of the Lord and we shouldn't fear. And, people talk like that, but there is a definite reality. The word fear does mean something, and it is involved in the Christian life, as well as a kind of unbeliever's fear of the Lord. And so it is important to kind of process. And I like the way that he talks about, it's just really quite a simple thing. It's parental rather than punitive. It's as long as you're processing fear in light of your fear of a loving father that you respect, that loves you and will only discipline those who he loves. I mean, amen.
Amen.
And there's a real fear there, isn't there? There's, any child will know that some of those fathers, who love their kids and love them well, are not to be messed with,
Yeah.
And there's something about that.
So if I was a young monk struggling with assurance of salvation, this would probably help me.
I think so. It almost reminds me of what Luther said, or who was Luther's guy again? I keep forgetting his name.
Oh yeah.
The guy.
Staupitz.
Thank you. And that's why I keep forgetting it. I mean, like, what a crazy name. But anyway, so he, Luther's just like, I just want a loving God, and you see, he was directing him to this very kind of advice. He was just saying, you need to move to this level where you just accept that God is your father, wasn't reassuring him with that doctrinal sort of like cognitive, theological awesomeness, but basically just saying, listen, you can trust him. And, and there's something legitimate about that, because anyone who reads the Bible should have enough to work with to know that God can be trusted. So there is something that could lead to assurance there. 1 John, again, he who fears is not made perfect in love, for fear has to do with punishment. There's something very, very real in the way that he's talking there.
Perfect love drives out all fear. Is that a moment of perfectionism? I felt like he used the verse in that way.
Well, like, totally. And, but there is something about that verse that kind of moves in that direction. And that's kind of the provocative thing about that, because, John is saying essentially that you can kind of be a Christian and not, you've got something more to think about here, and there is a great treasure and a blessing in having that fear driven out by this love that you contemplate.
Well, I think, in the Ephesian church that John's writing to, false teachers come in and undermine their faith. And they'd said, you're not real Christians. And John said, well, here's how you can know you are a real Christian. You love the truth, you love the brothers, and you pursue holiness. These three things, 3 times he circles around those three fruits as the fruits of the new birth. So if you do these 3 things, you're the real deal. And he's assuring them in the face of false teaching that's undermined their faith.
Totally. But, but I think, whether it's that Gnostic thing in play or just whatever's corroding, essentially, whatever's corroding faith, he's essentially saying, it almost reminds me of William Cooper and the John Newton thing where, there he is, there is something more for him to have pressed onto, no doubt that William Cooper's in heaven right now, but did he miss out by not pursuing this, further in this life? And it's not perfectionism, but there's something there. There is a blessing lost by not really dwelling on the love of God at the end of the day, is what we're talking about, and believing it. So it's so close.
I keep coming back to every time I listen to this guy, I keep coming back to assurance. As the way of getting there. Right. Yeah.
Amen. It's a good word. Let's leave it there. It's been a long session for a little letter. All right, there we go. So John Cassian, stay tuned for some more
conferences.
Sounds like a cowboy. John Cassian. It's like Cassidy. Cassidy.
Cassidy.
All right, we're out. We're fresh out at this point.